When finding a village, people usually loot the blacksmith because it has a chest filled with useful items. But have you ever wondered, out of the billions of blacksmiths in Minecraft, which one has the rarest chest of all time? Well, earlier this year, a great seed finder called M33 Galaxy was on a quest to find out. He ran code to simulate Minecraft's world generation and searched through countless worlds until he discovered this fabled village, which has a blacksmith that somehow generated a chest with 21 diamonds, almost enough for a full suit of armor. And if you're wondering whether it's possible to find more, M33 Galaxy tried, but according to his calculations, it's impossible to find a blacksmith with more diamonds than this. But what if I told you there exists an even stranger blacksmith chest, and it's located in this plains village, found by the legendary seed finder Kris, who was also searching for rare chests, and this one generated with 54 obsidian, enough for 5 nether portals. Kris estimates that the chance of you finding this is only a 1 in every 281 trillion chests, but this is only blacksmith loot, so you may be wondering, what about the rarest chests in other structures? Well, believe it or not, there are chests out there with much rarer and stranger loot, which we're going to look at in the next anomaly. And stick around, because in this video, we're going to take a look at some of the rarest things ever found in Minecraft, most of which I bet you've never seen before. So sit back, subscribe, and let's continue. When exploring structures, you may come across enchanted items in chests, such as books or even weapons, and these enchants are completely random. However, it gets exponentially rarer to find items with stacked enchantments, meaning that finding the best enchanted items requires using code to simulate world generation. But there's only a handful of people in the Minecraft community who have the knowledge and willingness to do it. One of these people is Kris, who, if you don't know, is responsible for finding some of the rarest things in Minecraft, such as the dungeon with 6 spawners that we looked at in the previous episode. So let's go back to February of this year, when Kris was conducting a large-scale hunt for the rarest enchanted items. He started off by searching across all end cities to find the 3 strongest swords. The first of these is the Smite sword, which can be found on this seed and generated with Smite 5 and 6 other enchantments. Next, he found the Sharpness sword, which has Sharpness 4 and 6 other enchantments as well. And you may be disappointed that this isn't Sharpness 5, but according to Kris, if this was Sharpness 5, then the Sweeping Edge enchantment would be removed because of how enchantments work. So when finding this, he had to make a trade-off for the most enchantments. And finally, we have the Bane of Arthropods 5 sword, which like the others has 7 total enchantments. And despite Bane of Arthropods being useless, this sword kills spiders so easily that you could probably use it to survive in Australia. And now that we've seen the best swords across all end cities, let's move on to loot from other structures, because Kris also searched through jungle temples to find the rarest enchanted books, and he ended up finding 4 insane jungle temples. The first is located on this seed and has a book with 11 enchantments, including Silk Touch. The second temple also has another book with 11 enchantments, and this time Mending. Keep in mind that 11 enchantments is the limit for books in structures, so all these books will be like that, but with different enchantments. The next temple also has Silk Touch, but also has Curse of Vanishing on it as well, which makes this both incredibly lucky and unlucky. And the final temple has Silk Touch with Curse of Binding. Finally, Kris searched through strongholds, and previously he had found a loot seed with a book with 11 enchantments on it, but you had to use commands to spawn it in. But now he found actual world seeds with 11 enchantment books, which is this seed that has an 11 enchantment book with Silk Touch and Curse of Binding. And each of these 3 other seeds contain the same book as well. And at this point, these books may seem like common occurrences, but keep in mind that only 1 in trillions of chests have such overpowered books. But despite their near impossible rarity, you may be surprised to hear that when it comes to other structures, chest loot can get even stranger, as we'll see in the next anomaly. We've seen the rarest blacksmiths and the rarest enchanted items, but ruined portals can also have some very unusual loot. And as we uncover these chests, they'll go from least crazy to the most abnormal loot ever found. Starting with this one, which is buried deep underground on this seed, found by the seed finder Fragrant Result. And when you open this chest, you'll find 8 pairs of golden boots, which is possibly the worst rare loot in history, and feels straight out of a shoe store rather than a ruined portal. Similarly, this next one, found by M33 Galaxy on this seed, has a chest with 141 iron nuggets, which makes it the second most useless rare chest. But let's move on from these bad chests to one of the most useful ones ever. This next chest is located tens of millions of blocks away from spawn, and was discovered by the expert seed finder Scriptline. So you already know this is gonna be good. This chest contains an entire stack of golden carrots, and because golden carrots have some of the best saturation of any food, meaning they keep your hunger bar full for longer, it makes this the most nutritional chest chest in all of Minecraft, and by eating this whole stack, it could probably keep you sprinting for thousands of blocks. But what about an even more useful chest? Because this one gives you a starter kit right when you spawn. Found by M33 Galaxy, this ruined portal contains every single tool and almost every armor piece. Sadly, the maximum tools and armor in a chest is 8, meaning it's impossible to find one with everything. But M33 Galaxy made a compromise to have everything except 2 pieces of armor, and instead he replaced them with 2 gold blocks, so you'll have enough gold to craft the missing pieces. And the fact that this is right at spawn makes it feel like a bonus chest on steroids. At this point, we're reaching the limits of how strange loot can be. But believe it or not, this still isn't the rarest ruined portal, because that record goes to this one, which was discovered by a seed finder called Xinyu, and this chest currently holds the record for the most enchanted golden apples in a ruined portal, with 5 in this single chest. And keep in mind, the average portal chest only has a 1.5% chance for even a single enchanted Gapple, meaning that having 5 in 1 is an almost supernaturally rare occurrence. And yes, this comes nowhere near the ancient city chest with 14 enchanted Gapples, which we saw in episode 9, but keep in mind that golden apples are much more common in ancient cities, so this is still very impressive for a ruined portal. And what makes this seed even crazier is that it actually has another chest with 5 Gapples in the nether, so you can judge for yourself how rare this is. But anyway, that's enough rare chests for now, which means it's time to move on to some of the rarest world generation. In May of 2023, the seed finder Fragrant Result discovered a seed with a very unusual occurrence. If you travel to this location on Bedrock Edition, you'll find a lake that's completely frozen, but when you get to the center, you'll realize that there's an ocean monument that's partially generated in a small sinkhole. And because of its strange location, it means the top part of it is left exposed. As you may know, this is never supposed to happen with ocean monuments, because it's required for them to be covered by water. And as you can see, the game tried to add some water around it, but interestingly, parts of the monument are still on dry land and even have snow on them. Believe it or not, this is the closest a monument can ever get to being on dry land, so make sure to see this for yourself before it gets fixed in the future. And now let's move on to the next anomaly, which is even more visually impressive. You might remember back in episode 10 we talked about the biggest mushroom island ever discovered, which measured at 6.2 million blocks found by the seed finders Zenith. But secretly, over the past few years, seed finders had been searching for the largest one on large biomes, with some of these seed finders including Show Me 7, Giro, Meox, and Zenith. The reason I'm talking about this now is because recently the biggest island on large biomes became public, which was an 103 million block island found by Show Me 7. This was unprecedented, and Show Me 7 revealed that this was only one of 2 islands that had ever been discovered over 100 million blocks. But as I was working on this video, I received an urgent message from Zenith, telling me that the record was somehow broken again. It turns out another seed finder called Andrew took it upon himself to find a bigger one. For those who don't know, Andrew's the one responsible for finding the seeds that have no end islands, as well as the infamous quintuple pig spawners. And he's also the only person in the world to have the complete list of every Minecraft seed in 41 text files. So by now you can already tell that Andrew's sheer knowledge of Minecraft is unrivaled and has earned him an almost mythical reputation in the seed finding community. Zenith told me that Andrew coded a CUDA program and he managed to use the power of his graphics cards to completely destroy the search. Over the course of a single day, Andrew found over 900 seeds with mushroom islands in large biomes that were over 88 million blocks, and many islands over 5.5 million blocks on normal biomes. And keep in mind that only 60 seeds were ever found over the years in these 2 categories. So Andrew single-handedly beat all other seed finders who had put in thousands of hours of computing power with the strongest CPUs and most optimized programs, all in a single day. And Andrew even discovered a new record for the biggest mushroom island on normal biomes, with an island over 6.7 million blocks. But as for large biomes, Andrew found the king of all mushroom islands, coming in at over 117 million blocks. It's unknown just how rare this is, as it's significantly bigger than even his second biggest find at 109 million blocks. And even zooming out on the seed map, you can clearly see it among the other biomes, even though mushroom islands are supposed to be small compared to everything else, making this one of the craziest anomalies in Minecraft. And fun fact, this view from 10,000 blocks in the sky took about 12 hours to render the whole biome. And the fact that this is located tens of millions of blocks away from spawn means that no one in history would have ever found this randomly. And if you're curious on what the longest mushroom island island is. Luckily, as I was editing this video, Zenith found it on this seed, which has an island that measures about 27,000 blocks across each side. And this has just over 98 million blocks of surface area. So right now, it's about the 10th biggest island overall. Hey guys, it's Roven from the future, because just as I was about to upload this video, it turns out that Show-Me7 used Andrew's program to reclaim the record by finding an even bigger island that's 125 million blocks in size and almost 29,000 blocks across, which also takes the record for the longest one. And for normal biomes, another seed finder called Techo also used Andrew's method to find a 6.9 million block island. And believe it or not, there's even a leaderboard at this point for the biggest islands. So who knows what else they'll find in the future. And despite these mushroom islands being incredibly large, they're tiny compared to this next anomaly. Since the early days of Minecraft, people have always wanted a seed with a survival island surrounded by endless ocean. However, the reality is this is an almost impossible task to find, since you'll always eventually reach other land biomes. But despite that, some people still wondered what the seed is with the biggest ocean in all of Minecraft. And over the years, many players have claimed to have found the largest one. But the truth is that to find the biggest ocean, you can't just search on modern versions. That's because back in update 1.6 and below, oceans were much bigger, covering about 70% of the landscape, compared to now, where oceans have become tiny. Also, it's practically impossible for a normal player to randomly come across the biggest ocean on their own, as the only way to find this is by using special programs to search through trillions of seeds. And luckily, behind the scenes, for almost 5 years, seed finders ran secret searches to find the biggest one. So let's start with normal biomes. For normal biomes, the biggest ocean is on this seed, found by Show-Me7, which has an ocean that stretches 90,000 blocks across each side. And this would already take you real-life days to cross by swimming. But this is nowhere near the record on large biomes. As for large biomes, the biggest ocean is on this legendary seed, found by a seed finder called Delvin4519, where an ocean generated hundreds of thousands of blocks across, with its area covering billions of blocks. It may be hard to comprehend just how big this is, so for context, this is the biome map fully zoomed out, and next to it is the biome map for the biggest mushroom island. So you can imagine just how massive this ocean is. And keep in mind that this is the same scale. At its longest point, this ocean goes from almost x minus 200,000 to over x 350,000. And if you're wondering how long it would take you to swim across that, in these old versions there was no swimming mechanic. So you could only swim about 1.3 blocks per second. And if you were to try and swim across this giant ocean from one side to the other, which is about 550,000 blocks at its longest, it would take you about 120 real-life hours of non-stop swimming. And since you also lose about 1 hunger bar per 100 blocks of swimming, it means that you die of starvation only about 2,000 blocks in on your journey, meaning you'd have to bring a boat, but it would still take you real-life days of boating to escape this. And what's even more convenient about the seed is that when you spawn, you'll be on a tiny island on the edge of a bigger island, with nothing but a couple of trees and sugarcane. And all around you, you'll have endless ocean, with nothing but distantly scattered mushroom islands, making this objectively the best survival island in all of Minecraft. So if you were looking for that challenge, here you go. You won't find a better seed. And honestly, it would be good if this was a world type you could toggle, because this generation is very unique. So now that we've seen the biggest ocean in old updates, what about the biggest continent in modern versions? Well, Show-Me7 ran a search and found this seed, which has a mega continent that stretches about 10,000 blocks across each side. This is incredibly rare in modern versions, since as we talked about, oceans are very small now. But despite its sheer scale, this is how small the mega continent is compared to the biggest ocean, which goes to show how abnormally large that ocean is. But now that we've seen what the best seed finders can do, let's look at a few anomalies that were discovered without programs and by complete random chance. In July of 2025, a Reddit user called ExperiencePretend775 was playing Minecraft like normal with his friend when they came across a stronghold. They made their way to the portal room only to discover a fossil perfectly aligned with the end portal. And usually if something abnormal generates in the end portal room, it's a bad thing because it breaks the portal. But this time, this occurrence almost seems too good to be true, because not only is the portal untouched, but you're able to get 14 exposed diamonds for free right before you you go to the end, making this one of the luckiest end portals. And according to Experienced Pretend, from his research he said that this is about a 1 in 400,000 chance, which isn't the rarest anomaly, but for a non-seed finder this is very impressive. We all know that the only way to get cooked food in Minecraft is by putting it in a furnace or campfire. But earlier this year, a Reddit user called University Melodic discovered a seed where you can get cooked food naturally. At this location, an animal pen generated right next to flowing lava. And when the lava starts burning the fence, it makes the animals catch on fire and naturally drop cooked meat. This doesn't always happen, by the way, because of randomness, but most of the time it does. And University Melodic said he was just manually searching for rare things when he came across this. And similar to the previous anomaly, it's not the rarest thing in the world, but a seed finder called Epic10L2 said that even with programs, this would be a bit hard to search for. So for a random player, this is very unusual to find. In December of 2022, a Reddit user called Paulie123 discovered a strange seed where you spawn directly inside a cage with an iron golem. But there's more to this seed than meets the eye, because when I tried it for myself, the spawn radius made it so that it's a very unlikely chance you'll spawn in that exact spot where the iron golem is. And it took hundreds of tries of reloading the world and continuously respawning until I got the specific spawn point. And what's absurd is that this person isn't a seed finder, meaning that not only did they come across this seed by random chance, but they also got the exact spawn inside the golem cage, which is almost unnaturally rare for a non-seed finder. This whole seed feels like the start to an RPG game, where you wake up trapped in the enemy camp, and I'm surprised the golem doesn't give you a side quest while you're trapped together. Feels like you could make a whole backstory about this spawn point. And now that we've seen what non-seed finders have discovered, let's get back to some more one-of-a-kind anomalies that seed finders have found. In October of 2022, Mooing Cow Milk was seed finding when he came across something unusual. If you type in this seed, the moment you spawn, you'll be ambushed by a witch and her cat, making this already a very chaotic spawn point. But you'll also notice there's a ruined portal, which luckily has golden apples in the chest, as well as a sword to help you fight off the attack. But the weird thing about this is that despite there being a witch, there's no witch hut in sight, making this the only known homeless witch. As you might have guessed, the reason this happened is because the witch hut that was originally here was overwritten by this ruined portal. Mooing Cow Milk says that it's very hard for a ruined portal to completely overwrite a witch hut, because during his seed hunt he found lots of seeds where parts of the hut were still standing, making this occurrence incredibly rare. So it makes sense that this witch would be angry, since her house basically got bulldozed, but she's still not as unlucky as this next witch, found by Endermander111, which has a hut but somehow got stranded on a deserted island in the middle of the ocean. And if you thought that was strange, this next witch hut is even more abnormal. This was found earlier this year by the seed finder Doogie8876, and to the naked eye this doesn't seem too unusual, but what makes this hut unique lies below the surface. Despite looking like your average run-of-the-mill witch hut, if you go underwater you'll notice that this one has unnaturally long support beams because of the unusual depth of this swamp. And keep in mind that witch huts in water are usually only a few blocks deep, making this one of the deepest witch huts ever found. But now let's move on from witch huts to see some different anomalies found by Mooing Cow Milk, who discovered some seeds which are straight up inappropriate. Over the years, seed finders have dedicated their time to finding the most mysterious and impressive seeds that exist in Minecraft. But have you ever wondered what happens if they use their seed finding powers to search for forbidden seeds that Mojang doesn't want players to find? And you might be wondering what I mean by that. Well, just take a look at this seed, where you spawn in an ocean with nothing but this in front of you. This is a real seed discovered by Mooing Cow Milk, and this location looks like it was custom built by someone rather than being naturally generated. And Mojang, you have a lot of explaining to do as to why this seed exists. But if you thought that was weird, get ready to see the next one, because in September of 2022, Mooing Cow Milk ran another search, and this time he discovered a village with 2 tall villager houses. And since he named this village New York, you can probably see where this is going. This is one of the most devious seeds in all of Minecraft, and it's unknown how Mooing Cow Milk even searched for these seeds. But the fact that he's a very skilled seed finder means that if he wanted to, he could find even more forbidden seeds in the future. So only time will tell if he does, or if other seed finders go rogue like this. But now let's move on to the next anomaly, which has an incredibly rare location, which is perfect for a survival challenge. In December of 2024, the seed finder Fragrant Result was searching for unusual terrain, and he ended up finding this seed, where you'll spawn in a survival island about 200 blocks from the ground, making this one of the few seeds where a giant island generates completely disconnected from the ground right at spawn. And this island is so big that it has several trees, both acacia and oak, as well as wildlife, coal and iron ore, and it even has a small cave that goes right through it, making this one of the best survival seeds ever found. The only small problem with this is that there's no water or lava, so if you want to take on the challenge of surviving here, you might want to give yourself a starter chest with lava, water and obsidian, and try to survive here until you're ready to fight the dragon. In April of this year, a seed finder called Colin Henry was filtering through end cities when he discovered something unusual. If you go on this seed and beat the dragon, the gateway will teleport you to the top of an end ship. This is already unusual, but not too rare, and by looking at the rest of the end city, nothing seems off about it. But Colin realized that for some strange reason, this end city was supposed to continue generating at this location, but the corridors are cut off, and even on the Q biome seed map, it shows that it should have kept going. Keep in mind, Colin has conducted extensive seed finds in the end, and he's never come across something like this. He theorized that this happened because of the end gateway that generated atop the ship, which isn't the rarest occurrence, but its position may have somehow influenced the generation of the end city itself. But that's not the only strange end city Colin came across, because in July he found this seed, which has another end city that seems completely normal. However, if you go to its far side, you'll quickly realize something is off about it. For some reason, one of its branches generated in such a way that made it extremely long, stretching far beyond what you'd expect. And what's even weirder is that you'll notice that there's a walkway that's supposed to lead to an end ship. However, the ship is completely missing, and you may be wondering how this is even possible. Well, the only way this can happen is if a ship generated outside of the 17 by 17 chunk radius of the city's origin point. And it's a fairly known occurrence that end ships can be partially cut in half because a section of them has gone past the radius. But having the ship be completely missing is extremely rare and only possible because of the sheer length of this specific end city. And on Q biomes, you can also see that the ship was supposed to generate here. But this also begs the question of what's the longest possible end city? Because if two arms stretched this far out on each side, you'd get an incredibly long city. And just imagine if that happened on all four sides. Obviously with only one end ship. But sadly, no one's found this so far. But anyway, now that we've seen those strange end cities, let's move on to some more unusual structures. In the past, we've looked at villages that have had some houses generating underground, as well as villages with no houses, but there's never been a seed where the entire village is underground. That's because villages are supposed to generate on the top layer on flat land, so you'd never think there could be a seed with an entire village underground. Well, the interesting thing about this game is that nothing's ever truly impossible, because M33 Galaxy took it upon himself to find this, and he ended up discovering this seed with a village well and a single house that generated underground. And if you were walking past this place, you'd never even realize that there's technically a village here. The reason this happened is because this village tried to generate in this abnormal location where a strange cave overlaps with a trial chamber, forcing the village to generate below everything. And even though this is a tiny village, the fact that a house generated technically makes it a proper village and not some glitched one with no houses. The only reason there aren't more houses is because the game couldn't find anywhere to place them. But there's also something creepy about this seed, because some of these torches from the village generated by themselves underground. So imagine you were strip mining and randomly came across these. It's the kind of stuff you'd see in a creepypasta, like someone else is in your world. Now that was a pretty small village, but have you ever wondered what's the smallest village of all time? Well, look no further than this seed, which was found by a seed finder called Awesome Player 98, which has a village with a single meeting point and nothing else. It doesn't even have any paths, making it even smaller than villages with no houses. And this one's not completely underground since there's some light shining through, but again, you'd have no idea this was here if you were walking past this place. If you travel through an end gateway, you'll find small islands scattered all throughout the end dimension. But most people don't know that it's possible for these islands to stack on top of each other. And so in January of 2024, Kris wanted to find the biggest stack possible. And with his seed finding knowledge and the help of some Minecraft at Home community members, he ran a search, and what he found were two insane seeds. The first is this one, which has the largest endstone pillar in a single chunk at 22 blocks tall and made up of two small end islands. But the largest largest one possible is on this seed, with 4 end islands across 2 chunks, making this insane 26 block tall pillar. And the craziest part is that you'd need to travel over 25 million blocks to get to this, even though it's completely useless. But anyway, now let's head back to the overworld to see some strange spawner anomalies. In December of 2023, a seed finder called Cracked Magnet discovered a seed with an unusual concentration of spawners. For some reason, this mountain has 8 spawners which can all be activated by standing between them, which allows you to make the ultimate mob farm. And there is technically a 9th spawner here, but it can't be activated at the same time as all the rest. So let me know in the comments which seed you like most, this one or the cursed 6 spawner dungeon found by Kris. But now let's move on to a different dungeon, which was found in March of 2025 by Awesome Player 98. At first glance, this looks normal, until you realize that it's somehow generated with 4 chests, even though dungeons can only generate with up to 2 chests each. So how did this even happen? Well, to a normal person, it doesn't look like there should be a reason as to why there's 4 chests. But the reason this happened is because 2 dungeons just happened to generate perfectly on top of each other, creating the illusion of a single dungeon. And theoretically, it may be possible for even more dungeons to generate on top of each other. Can you imagine coming across a spawner that has half a dozen chests surrounding it? It would look almost paranormal. And this next dungeon was also found by Awesome Player 98 and is just as strange because it's somehow generated perfectly symmetrically with 2 spawners and 3 chests. I don't know why, but this feels like the spawners are about to fight, with the middle chest being the referee. It's a very strange sight, but this next anomaly is possibly one of the strangest ones ever. When Kris was conducting his seed hunt to find the chest with the most enchanted golden apples, he ended up finding this legendary chest with 14 enchanted gapples. And after brute forcing trillions of loot seeds, this seemed to be the absolute limit of enchanted gapples in a single chest. However, Kris believed that it was possible to find a chest with 15 gapples, but only through an extremely obscure method. You might know that trial chambers have hoppers that generate as a way to sort your inventory, and Kris discovered that it was possible to have a chest naturally generate from a different structure right above the hopper. And if that chest had an enchanted golden apple, then it's possible for it to flow through the hopper. And if an ancient city chest with 14 enchanted gapples just happened to generate in the perfect position under the hopper, then it was possible for a chest to naturally have 15 gapples. So Kris ran a search to find whether this concept was even theoretically possible. And after scouring countless worlds, he found this minecart chest that managed to generate in this insane position above a hopper, and an ancient city chest that somehow also generated right under it. This doesn't have the theoretical loot Kris was looking for, but as you can see, the loot from the mine shaft and the ancient city gets mixed in this chest, and this makes it a proof of concept. However, despite this being possible, this is the only known instance of this happening in all of Minecraft, as Kris discovered that not even the sister seeds of this seed had this occurrence. And after that, Kris considered finding a dungeon chest instead of a minecart to be on top of the hopper, and he ran extensive calculations until he discovered something that put an end to his search. He found that if he searched every single seed and chunk in existence, then there's only a 52.7% chance that a population seed that can make a 15 gapple chest exists somewhere in Minecraft. But as you can imagine, the sheer computing power required for this operation makes it unfeasible for one person to accomplish. And even if someone managed to comb through the entirety of Minecraft seeds, then it's still a coin toss as to whether this exists, meaning that this project is now on indefinite hold, unless something gets added to Minecraft to make it more possible. So if a chest with 15 enchanted gapples exists, it's one of the rarest theoretical things that can ever happen in Minecraft, and would likely be located tens of millions of blocks away in the corners of an obscure seed. In April of this year, M33 Galaxy issued a challenge to his fellow seed finders. He told people to go on this seed and try to find the end portal near these coordinates without using any commands, because if you try to find this using only Eyes of Ender or digging around, you'll quickly realize that it's almost impossible. And even if you go to spectator mode, it's incredibly difficult to locate the portal. And if you don't believe me, I'm in spectator mode now, right in front of the portal. So let me know if you can see it. I'm guessing a lot of you didn't, and that's because this is actually the most hidden end portal in all of Minecraft, which somehow generated stashed away inside the foundation of an ancient city. And you can even find the silverfish spawner hidden in the rubble. So maybe this is a hint by Mojang that this is indeed an ancient city portal. And while this is already insane, something else unique about this location is how the stronghold and ancient city merge together. Because if you explore this area, you'll find ancient ruins and even a corrupted library, which probably contains forbidden knowledge. And all of this would be very creepy to randomly come across. And you'd expect this to be a Bedrock edition seed, but somehow it's on Java. It's like for some reason, the portal was intentionally hidden to prevent you from entering. If you didn't know, each chunk in Minecraft has a 10% chance of becoming something known as a slime chunk, which is a chunk that allows slimes to spawn underground. And over the years, many people have attempted to find the largest area of slime chunks in Minecraft. But the problem is that because of the 10% chance of each slime chunk to exist, it gets exponentially rarer to find multiple slime chunks near each other. Just like the 10% chance of each portal frame being filled with an Eye of Ender. But I did some digging, and I found out that 5 years ago, a seed finder called Techman88 had been conducting a search to find the biggest area of slime chunks. Some of his finds included a 6x4 area of slime chunks. However, that wasn't the biggest. His best find was this, a seed that somehow has a solid 5x5 slime chunk area, as well as 3 extra ones connected to it, creating 28 connected slime chunks in total, making this the biggest slime chunk area in history. And what's crazy about this is that if you go here during the day and replace the stone with grass, you can turn this into a mini replica of a super flat world, complete with the slimes. That is, if you can take the almost 8 million block journey to even get here. And after finding this, Techman88 released 2 seed lists with other seeds that have 6x4 and 5x5 areas. And for now, this seems to be the limit for slime chunks, making this one of the most unique anomalies ever found. And before we move on to the next one, make sure to subscribe, since my goal is to get 100,000 by the end of the year. And we're going to be cutting it close since there's only 4 months left. But let's make it happen. And now let's move on to the next anomaly, where we'll uncover some of the strangest buried treasures ever found. We all know that buried treasures usually generate around coastlines and can be found with treasure maps, but in rare cases these chests can appear in abnormal locations. So this anomaly isn't about the rarest loot, but about the rarest generation of buried treasure. And you may be thinking that buried treasures can't be that strange, but as we've seen in the past, they've been found in strange locations before, such as one that was buried under Bedrock that we saw in episode 4. So in December of 2022, the seed finder Dylan DC14 went on a seed hunt and found a few seeds with some of the most abnormal buried treasures ever. One of the seeds he found was this one, where a treasure chest somehow generated floating in the air. To my knowledge, this is the only known occurrence of this happening in all of Minecraft, as I searched online but couldn't find any other mention of this. And the reason this happened has something to do with the ruined portal that generated at this location, as ruined portals can sometimes overwrite the terrain, which probably happened here before the chest generated. Dylan also found another chest that's semi-exposed. However, this one generated right over a ruined portal chest, creating a small stack of chests. And bigger stacks have been found before, such as the 3 chest stack found with ocean ruins. However, there's never been a sighting of this happening completely exposed, rather than underwater or in stone. But believe it or not, this isn't the craziest chest Dylan found, because he discovered another one on this seed, which generated a buried treasure over 100 blocks in the sky at Y120. And this is even partially exposed, which makes it even more rare. But what if I told you there's a buried treasure which generated even higher than this? This seed currently holds the record for the highest naturally generated treasure ever found by Damduck at an insane height of Y248. And after seeing this, you may be wondering, what's the lowest buried treasure of all time? Well, I already mentioned the one that spawned at Bedrock level, but that was on an old version where Bedrock was at Y4, and now Bedrock can be found at much deeper levels. But sadly, after 1.18, buried treasures need a certain selection of blocks to generate, and this blocks treasures from generating below Y0 in modern versions. But in a recent snapshot, there was a glitch where these surface blocks can rarely generate at lower levels, which allowed M33 Galaxy to find this seed, where buried treasure generated at Y-62, setting the new record. But now let's move on to the next anomaly, where Dylan DC14 found a different kind of strange seed. In October of 2021, Dylan discovered a very interesting seed. If you go to this location, you'll find an abandoned village, and overlooking that village is one of the strangest cacti in Minecraft. From the outside, it seems normal, but this cactus is in a very unique situation, because at any moment it'll collapse on itself. That's because you'll notice that the sand right above it is floating, and as soon as the cactus grows one more block, it updates the sand, making it drop and destroy itself. This is the only known cactus in existence that does something like this, and one of the only ways you can find a naturally dropped cactus item. Now let's move on to the next anomaly, where we'll take a look at some of the craziest spawn points ever found. It's common knowledge that when you respawn in a Minecraft world, you'll always be roughly in the same position. But what if I told you there's a Minecraft seed that, depending on your luck, you can either spawn above the clouds or inside an ancient city? This strange phenomenon was found in June of 2025 by M33 Galaxy, with the lowest possible spawn on this seed being a Y-49 and the highest a Y-197, with a difference of 246 blocks between them, which gives the seed the greatest spawn height variation out of all worlds. But this isn't the only strange spawn point, since there are a few other ones which can be considered even more rare, such as this seed, which was found in August of 2021 by mooing cow milk. If we load into this world, the first thing you'll notice is the unusual loading screen, and this is actually one of the rarest loading screens ever discovered, since there's something strange going on with the chunk color map, which is what this loading screen represents. But what makes this even crazier is the moment you spawn, you'll be instantly crawling inside a ruined portal that's stranded in the middle of nowhere. And to make things worse, there are ocean ruins and drowned everywhere. So we've seen the biggest spawn variation and the rarest loading screen, but this next spawn point should technically be impossible, because if you didn't know, in modern versions, Mojang made it so that you can't spawn underground, because you have to spawn on a sky exposed block. However, in June of this year, M33 Galaxy made an interesting discovery. Somehow on this seed, you spawn completely underground. This happened because of the unusual location of this village, which has path blocks that generated right above you, and since they generated right after you spawned in, instead of spawning on top of them, you end up underground, making this one of the only few instances where you can spawn completely underground on modern versions. And despite how rare this is, this next spawn point is just as interesting. In November of 2024, Fragrant Result discovered this Bedrock Edition seed, which gives you a naturally generated 1 block challenge. There's not really much you can do up here, but you can escape by jumping into this water. But there are some spawns which are much harder than this. For example, this one found by M33 Galaxy has an almost softlock seed, because you'll spawn on this giant pillar, and if you try to jump off, you'll die to fall damage. However, M33 said that it is possible to escape by digging down to between Y25 and Y30 and bridging 4 blocks, which allows you to jump off safely. And now that we've seen these spawn points, let's move on to the next anomaly, which contains one of the most interesting pieces of terrain in Minecraft. Earlier this year, Damduck and Dylan DC14 were searching for the highest point in Minecraft, which was an ice spike that reached to Y301, which I mentioned back in episode 10. But did you know that during that time, as they searched over 100 trillion seeds, they accidentally came across another anomaly? When you spawn on this seed, everything seems normal, but if you keep walking, you'll realize that you're actually on top of one of Minecraft's rarest mountains, if you can even call it a mountain, because this seed has the world's biggest shattered terrain, which brought up a large chunk of land up into the sky, with some parts of it reaching past the old world height limit. And according to Damduck, this biome isn't even supposed to generate this high up. This giant landmark stretches about 240 blocks across and is about 110 blocks wide, giving it its own ecosystem with animals and plants at the top of the world. And let me know if you can think of a name for this, because this is truly one of a kind. But what's most interesting about this seed is that if you use an elytra, this becomes a naturally generated obstacle course, because there's so many nooks and crannies you can fly through that you could host an entire elytra competition up here. And I'd highly recommend trying it out, even if you don't normally use the elytra. Now let's move on to the next anomaly, which is another rare mountain, but for an entirely different reason. In July of 2025, a Reddit user called Bria was playing on his survival world like normal. However, during his exploration, he came across something very unusual. He was exploring a nearby area to his base when he discovered a mountain, which upon closer inspection looked suspiciously like the character from Among Us. And the fact that this was found randomly by a non-seed finder makes it all the more rare. And other than this, the location isn't that strange. But if you try this seed, just be careful. You never know who's the imposter. In July of 2023, Fragrant Result discovered a seed with 2 unusual temples. For some strange reason, these jungle temples generated completely stranded in the ocean, and it should come as no surprise that this is on Bedrock edition. And even a single temple in the ocean would have been weird, but the fact that these two are within sight of each other makes it a very strange phenomenon. And even though these are stranded on the water, they're still much safer than this next temple, which is one of the deadliest temples ever found. This was discovered by Dylan DC14 earlier this year, where a desert temple somehow generated in a lava cave, like some sort of ancient relic. The only good thing about this is that you can't accidentally die to the TNT, since it gets cut off by the bedrock. But that also means there's no loot here as well, making this very useless unless you care about archaeology. And it would have at least been interesting if the floor went through to the void. But anyway, now that we've seen temples in strange and unsafe locations, there's one that feels even more out of place. On this seed, a desert temple somehow generated in the middle of a forest, and that's because a tiny desert managed to generate here. And even though this looks weird, at least it's more peaceful than the previous ones. In December of 2022, the famous seed finder Cracked Magnet discovered a seed where you can beat the entire game in the chunk you spawn in. The only thing you need to do is activate the bonus chest, as there's no wood whatsoever in this chunk. But because the wood from the bonus chest isn't renewable, you'll have to use it wisely. And at first glance, this chunk may seem barren, but deep underground you'll find a stronghold and enough lava to make a nether portal. And the moment you enter the nether, you'll find yourself in the middle of a fortress, which allows you to get blaze rods. And there's also a warped forest, so you can easily get ender pearls as well, all in the same chunk. Then once you come back and fill out the end portal, then you're allowed to leave the chunk in the end to beat the game. Overall, this is a very rare seed with a great challenge. Now let's move on to the next anomaly, which has some more crazy world generation. 2 years ago, Fragrant Result came across one of the most unusual islands in Minecraft. From a distance, you can already tell something is off about it. It's just a giant pillar in the middle of the ocean. But the more you explore, the stranger it gets. Because there's also a desert temple buried deep inside the cliff, and this didn't even try to spawn on the surface, making it look like it's been buried by the sands of time. And it gets even crazier, because inside the temple, there's also a ruined portal as well. This whole island feels like something you'd see in One Piece rather than Minecraft. It's like someone tried to hide all their treasure in here. We all know that some parkour jumps in Minecraft are harder than others, with most people finding even a 4-block jump a bit difficult. But I was wondering, what's the hardest parkour jump in all of Minecraft? So I asked Hepe, who's a YouTuber who knows about this sort of thing, and what he showed me was this legendary jump called the Duo Quadragin Tuple 45 Strafe. And what if I told you that this is such a hard parkour jump that if you manage to beat it, it would be considered a major anomaly? So let me give you some context. We all know that sprint jumping gains you speed, but not many people know that by doing 45-degree strafes while jumping gives you approximately 2% more momentum every jump. And by doing this consecutively, you can start to do almost impossible jumps. So the Duo Quadragin Tuple jump requires doing 42 pixel perfect 45 strafes in a row. And keep in mind that you can't just stay at 45 degrees because sprint jumping and strafing actually lowers your movement speed. So you'll have to sprint jump starting at 0 degrees, then go to 45 degrees a tick later, and then go right back to 0 and sprint jump again, repeating this 42 times in a row, which allows you to make the hardest jump in Minecraft, which is only possible by 0.14071 blocks, or approximately 9 protons, meaning that if you somehow manage to do this jump, you would be much rarer than almost every other anomaly in Minecraft. And even with tool assistance, this is extremely difficult to set up, with only one person called Earth to Trash Can managing to use Taz to do it, meaning that making this jump on your own is borderline impossible. And if you're wondering why it's only 42 strafes in a row and not more, well, the 2% boost decreases every time you do a 45 strafe, and it becomes 0 at some point, which happens around the 43rd one, so it's not worth doing any more past that. But either way, this jump is so crazy, it would be the equivalent of dropping a nuke in Parkour Civilization. So let's hope Evbo doesn't hear about this. Over the years, many strange anomalies have happened with ocean monuments. From the one we saw earlier in this video, to the one that intersects with a completed end portal and makes an Elder Guardian spawn in the end, that we looked at in episode 9. But there are some features with ocean monuments that are often overlooked. One of these is the sponge rooms, which are hidden rooms full of sponges. And since these rooms are randomly generated, it means that there must be a certain monument in Minecraft that has the most sponges. Well, a few years ago, a seed finder called Matt was on the hunt to find it, and he ended up discovering this seed where a monument somehow generated with 13 sponge rooms, making it the most in history. And this is so many sponges, you could probably drain the entire area around the monument if you wanted to. In the past, we've already seen some of the rarest end portals in Minecraft. From portals that are glitched on one chunk, to ones that are corrupted by world generation. However, this one is about an unusual shape that to my knowledge hasn't been seen before, because this portal is completed but only has 2 blocks filled out. This happened because of the abnormal position of this chunk border, which somehow managed to cut into the far side of the portal. And if you're wondering what other shapes are possible with end portals, well, an end portal can also look like this if 4 chunks intersect in the middle of it. But to my knowledge, no one has managed to find this yet. And despite that being one of the rarest end portals, there are a few more strange strongholds that we're going to look at for this anomaly, such as this one, found by Seed Finder called Turtle Kid 2022, where if you walk around this stronghold, you'll notice there's an unusual number of fountains. And in fact, this stronghold currently holds the record for the most fountains, as it has 5 of them, making it a very peculiar sight. And Turtle Kid also discovered this seed, where 5 of these other rooms generated in a stronghold. These generations are very rare, but now let's move on to a different seed, which was found by Seed Finder called Eclipsed. If you go to this location on this seed, you'll find yourself at the furthest distance possible from a stronghold within the Java stronghold rings, giving you a distance of about 3,500 blocks away from the nearest stronghold. And as another seed finder described it, this location is the Point Nemo of strongholds. But now opposite to that, have you ever wondered what happens if 2 end portals generate too close to each other? Well, take a look at this seed found by Doogie8876, which has 2 end portals right on top of each other. And we've talked about this being possible before, but this is an actual seed that works on the latest version that has this. And this is right at spawn, which is very convenient. And speaking of overlapping strongholds, now I want to show you some crazy stronghold intersections with other structures, and not on Bedrock Edition, but on Java. The first is this seed, found by M33 Galaxy, which has a stronghold that overlaps with an igloo, ruined portal, and trial chamber, which is already insane, but this next one is even crazier. Found by Arch, this seed has a surface stronghold intersecting with both a desert temple and village, making the inside of this temple look absurd. But the king of all overlapping strongholds is this seed, discovered by Dylan DC14, who found it for a seed finding competition back in 2021. This seed and its sister seeds feature some of the rarest strongholds ever discovered in Minecraft, and out of all of them, this seed in particular is by far the craziest. It has an island with a surface stronghold, merged with a village, ocean ruins, ruined portal, and a shipwreck all in one spot, making this the most chaotic island ever discovered. And as I mentioned, you'd expect something like this to be on Bedrock Edition, but somehow this is on Java, which makes it all the more rare. In Minecraft, some anomalies are incredibly rare, but are too short to talk about for a long period of time. So now we're going to take a look at some various small anomalies, which have been found by seed finders, but aren't big enough to have a whole section on them. Starting with this village chest, which was found by M33 Galaxy and has 8 furnaces inside it. This actually holds the record for the most furnaces in a chest, and surprisingly, the chances of finding this are a 1 in 281 trillion, which is insane for this type of loot. The next small anomaly anomaly is in this seed found by Turtle Kid, which has the deepest emerald ore in Minecraft. And if you didn't know, emerald ores usually spawn on the surface, which is why deep slate emerald is so rare. But what makes this strange is that deep slate emeralds are only supposed to generate down to Y-16, but this one somehow generated at Y-17. The reason this happened is because this was originally a vein of 2 emeralds that generated at Y-16, but this cave removed the first emerald, leaving only this one at the bottom, and making it the deepest emerald ever. Now let's move on to this seed, which was found by Awesome Player 98, and has a tiger tree which for some reason generated flying in the sky. And even though its position is already unusual, what makes it even weirder is that there's no tree trunk at the bottom. Instead, it just has leaves everywhere. So I guess we'll have to ask Santa as to why that happened. Now continuing with the next small anomaly, we have this one from M33 Galaxy, who managed to find one of the lowest chunks in a non-sinkhole, where all the blocks have a surface height of less than Y-54, which is very unique. And other than this, M33 Galaxy found some other weird anomalies as well, such as this unnatural void hole. And if you remember, in the previous episode, we looked at the biggest void hole in Minecraft, which was created by a giant ruined portal that generated at bedrock level. However, this time, the ruined portal tried to generate below the bedrock, which created this unnatural looking hole, which you would never even notice if you were playing normally. Next, we have this seed, found by Doogie8876, where an ocean monument happened to generate right next to a sinkhole. And because of its abnormal position, the monument's legs are stretched far down. And if you look at this from the middle, it doesn't even feel like Minecraft anymore. It's like you're in some sort of underwater palace. Next, we have another seed found by M33 Galaxy that features an abnormal igloo. If you look at this from the outside, you can already tell that something's off. For some reason, this igloo generated deep underground. And if you follow the ladder down, you'll hit bedrock. This isn't as exciting as the igloo on Bedrock Edition, which made a void hole that we saw in the previous episode, but this is the best we'll get on Java. And while searching for this, M33 Galaxy found some other strange igloos, such as this one where the ladder leads down to a dungeon, and even frees the villager. And this other one has an igloo that generated inside lava. Next, we have this seed found by Dylan DC14, which has 5 blaze spawners all activatable at once, which are the most activatable blaze spawners in one spot, and this allows you to make the most overpowered blaze farm possible. Dylan also found this famous seed, which lets you spawn on deep slate emerald, but keep in mind that it's a 1 in 400 chance of spawning here, so it might take you a while until you get this spawn. But now let's see a seed found by a seed finder called Your Local Knight, who found something that looks straight out of a cartoon. If you go on this seed, you'll find a woodland mansion and village merged together, which is already strange, but on top of that, there's a ginormous pillager outpost just looming over everything, making it feel like the ultimate villain's lair as he watches the destruction down below. But anyway, now that we've seen this assortment of small anomalies, let's move on and take a look at some interesting villages. First, we have the tallest village ever found, which was discovered by M33 Galaxy, which has a village that starts at Y148 and goes all the way down to Y-51, making this a 199 block tall village, which is insane. But this next seed is just as crazy, because it has the most villages in an 1,000 block radius, found by Zenith, with 16 villages in this area. But what about some weird house generation? Well, on this seed, we have a very strange villager house, which somehow generated underwater. And if you didn't know, villager houses are always supposed to generate on land, even if there's water below them, making this incredibly unusual. And speaking of rare villager houses, Awesome Player 98 found this seed, where a church is carved right into the rock, making it feel ancient, and creating a unique aesthetic that you don't normally see. And on top of that, this is flooded as well. Now, let's take a look at one of the most dangerous villages in Minecraft. Found by Your Local Knight, this village is on the brink of destruction. For some reason, the villagers decided this treacherous cavern was the perfect place to build their village. And surprisingly, all the houses are safe, but the same can't be said about the villagers. For the past year, Kris had the idea to find an abnormally large minecart stack, and recently he teamed up with Dylan to make it happen. So what they searched for were mineshaft corridors that generated chests all in the same location as a trial chamber. This would still be difficult to find, because according to Kris, each spot in a mineshaft corridor only has a 1% chance of spawning chests. So both Kris and Dylan ran code, and they searched billions of seeds, until Kris's computer found this one, which has a stack of 6 minecarts from a mine shaft that was overwritten by the trial chamber. Kris also says it's possible for a seed to exist that has 7 or 8 minecarts, but they're currently not looking for that. So if you want to keep up to date with what Kris is finding, I'd recommend subscribing to him, and you can find his channel in the description. Also, something interesting about this occurrence is that this is actually one of the furthest anomalies ever found, as it almost takes 30 million blocks on each axis to get here, meaning it would probably take you real life months to travel here in survival, which goes to show how many obscure anomalies are hidden in the corners of Minecraft worlds. And that's all for now, and if you want to see more rare anomalies like this, click here, and I'll see you next time. Bye!